The weather satellite went offline exactly 12 hours before the worst storm in 300 years was scheduled to hit Colony 7, and Duncan Krauss was the only being on the entire planet who seemed to care. "You are overreacting," Thexelvarn said, watching with 4 of his 6 eyes as Duncan hammered another thermal blanket over his cabin window. The karate engineer had stopped by to deliver supplies and found the human in full crisis preparation mode. The meteorological predictions indicate a standard winter storm.
"We experience these every season."
"Your meteorological predictions are based on a satellite that just died," Duncan said, not pausing in his work.
"Which means you are flying blind into whatever is actually coming." "I am not taking chances."
"The backup weather stations are functioning. They show nothing unusual."
"Ground stations have a range of maybe 200 kilometers. That storm system is forming 3,000 kilometers away over the thermal ocean.
By the time your ground stations detect how bad it really is, it will be too late to prepare." Thexel made the karate equivalent of a dismissive gesture with his primary manipulators.
"You humans. Always so paranoid.
Always preparing for disasters that never come.
This is why you never relax.
Why you never enjoy peace.
This is why we survive things that kill everyone else." Duncan finished securing the window and moved to the next one.
"I have seen storms on Earth that would make your worst blizzard look like a light snow. And the common factor in every survival story is the same: the people who prepared lived.
The people who assumed it would not be that bad died.
This is not Earth.
This is Colony 7. We have been here for 80 years. We know our weather patterns. You have been here for 80 years during a climate stability period. Your own geological records show that this planet goes through cycles. And every 300 years, it gets hit by a megastorm that restructures the entire northern hemisphere. Guess what anniversary is coming up?" Thexel's bioluminescent patterns flickered with uncertainty. "The 300-year mark is next month." "Not now."
"Climate does not follow calendars.
It follows physics.
And the physics say a massive low-pressure system is forming over the thermal ocean, pulling cold air from the polar vortex, and when those two meet, this entire region is going to get slammed."
"You are speculating based on incomplete data."
"I am extrapolating based on Earth meteorological models and 300 years of your own historical records. The last megastorm killed 60% of the native fauna and flash froze everything within 500 kilometers of where we are standing.
I am not gambling that the next one will be gentle." "So you are turning your cabin into a fortress." "I am turning my cabin into a survival shelter." There is a difference.
Duncan gestured to the modifications he had spent the last week implementing.
Triple insulated walls. Emergency heating systems with 4 redundant power sources. 60 days of food and water. Medical supplies. Communications equipment that can punch through anything short of a direct lightning strike.
If this storm is as bad as I think it will be, this cabin might be the only thing standing when it is over. And you will be alone in your fortress, congratulating yourself on being right while the rest of us carry on normally in the colony. Or you and anyone else with functioning survival instincts will be in here with me, staying alive while the storm tries to kill us."
Duncan looked at the karate directly. "I am not doing this because I want to be right. I am doing this because I want everyone to survive."
"When that storm hits, this door is open to anyone who needs shelter.
No questions asked. No, I told you so. Just survival."
Thexel's pattern shifted to show something that might have been grudging respect.
"You truly believe this is necessary?" "I truly believe preparation is the difference between tragedy and inconvenience." "I hope I am wrong."
"I hope this is all overkill and the storm is mild and I wasted a week of work on unnecessary reinforcements.
But if I am right, this cabin will save lives. That is worth looking paranoid. The colony leadership should be informed of your concerns. I filed a report with Colonial Administrator Kresh 3 days ago.
He dismissed it as human anxiety and told me to stop bothering him with speculation. Kresh is very confident in our infrastructure. Kresh is very confident in general. That is a character flaw when dealing with nature. Nature does not care about confidence. It cares about preparation.
Thexel left shortly after, unconvinced but slightly unsettled. Duncan continued his preparations, working through the day and into the night. He reinforced the roof supports. He dug a trench around the cabin for drainage. He stockpiled firewood even though he had electric heating. He tested and retested every system. Because that was what humans did. They prepared. They over-prepared. They assumed the worst and built contingencies for contingencies. Other colonists stopped by over the next 2 days. Some were curious. Some were amused. Most were dismissive.
You think very highly of yourself, said Virex Thorne, a karate trader who had been on Colony 7 longer than Duncan.
Building your human fortress while we simple aliens trust our infrastructure.
I think very highly of physics, Duncan replied. And physics says a cold front meeting a warm front over open ocean creates energy release that has to go somewhere.
I would prefer it does not go through me.
Your species survived on a death world.
You evolved paranoia as survival trait. We evolved on a gentle world. We learned to trust our environment. And when you come to a new environment, you assume it will be gentle because that is your experience. I assume every environment is trying to kill me until proven otherwise. Different survival strategies. One of which is wrong.
Or both are situational.
Your strategy works when the environment is actually gentle.
Mine works when it is not.
Time will tell which situation we are in. The storm warnings started 36 hours before the blizzard hit. Not from the satellite that was still dead, but from Duncan's own equipment.
He had built a small weather station from spare parts, positioned it on the hill behind his cabin, and linked it to a predictive model he had coded himself. The data it returned made his blood run cold.
Atmospheric pressure dropping faster than anything in the colonial records.
Wind speeds projected at over 200 kilometers per hour. Temperature plunge of 60 degrees expected within 6 hours of the storm front's arrival. And precipitation levels suggesting snowfall measured in meters, not centimeters.
He transmitted his findings to the colonial administration.
They responded with polite dismissal and a reminder that only certified meteorologists were permitted to issue weather warnings. Then get a certified meteorologist to check my data, Duncan transmitted back. Because if I am reading this correctly, you have maybe 30 hours to get everyone into reinforced shelter before this planet becomes uninhabitable.
Your concern is noted, came the reply.
However, our ground stations indicate normal winter storm activity. Please refrain from causing unnecessary panic.
Duncan stared at the transmission for a long moment.
Then he sent one final message, for the record, I try to warn you.
When this goes wrong, remember I tried. My door will be open to anyone who needs it. Duncan Krauss, signing off. He spent the next 24 hours doing final preparations. By the time the storm was 12 hours out, his cabin was ready. By the time it was 6 hours out, the first refugees started arriving. Thexel came first, his bioluminescent patterns showing embarrassment.
The ground stations have updated their predictions.
The storm is larger than expected. How much larger? Significantly. Colonial administration has issued a shelter-in-place order. I have been living in temporary quarters with minimal insulation. May I accept your earlier offer? Get in here.
Bring anyone else who needs shelter.
Over the next 3 hours, 7 more colonists arrived. All karate. All from the outlying research stations that suddenly looked very vulnerable in the face of updated weather models. Where is everyone else? Duncan asked as he got the refugees settled. In the main colony.
Administrator Kresh says their buildings are rated for severe weather.
Rated based on what data?
They have never experienced a storm like this.
He is confident in the engineering. Confidence is not insulation. How far is the main colony? 15 kilometers. Too far to evacuate now.
The storm will hit before they could get here.
Duncan checked his instruments. We have maybe 2 hours before conditions become unsurvivable outside. Anyone who is not in proper shelter by then is in serious trouble. Perhaps the administrator is correct. Perhaps their buildings will hold. Perhaps. But I am not betting lives on perhaps.
The storm hit with a violence that exceeded even Duncan's worst predictions.
The wind came first, screaming out of the north like something alive and malevolent.
It hit the cabin with enough force to make the walls shudder. Then came the snow, not falling but flying horizontally, propelled by winds that Duncan's instruments clocked at 230 km per hour before the sensors froze solid.
The temperature dropped 40 degrees in the first hour. 60 in the second.
By the third hour, Duncan's external thermometer read -73 Celsius and still falling.
This is not possible, Thexel said, staring at the instruments. How is this possible?
It is a polar vortex collapse combined with thermal ocean evaporation and perfect storm dynamics, Duncan explained, monitoring his heating systems. Basically, every worst-case scenario happens simultaneously.
This is not weather. This is a planetary-scale catastrophe.
The Karate refugees huddled together near the heating units, their natural bioluminescence dimming in the cold despite Duncan's best efforts to keep the cabin warm. Their species had evolved on a temperate world. They were not built for this kind of cold.
How long will it last? Someone asked.
Based on the storm system size, at least 3 days at this intensity.
Maybe a week total before conditions become survivable outside again. And the main colony? Duncan checked his communications equipment.
He had been trying to raise the colony for the last hour with no response.
I do not know. Their buildings were not designed for this. If they lose power, lose heating, they are in serious trouble. Can we help them? Not until this storm passes. Going out there now is suicide.
The first night was terrifying. The wind howled like nothing Duncan had ever heard on Earth. The snow piled up so fast that within 6 hours, the cabin was buried to the roofline. Only the reinforced air vents kept them from suffocating.
The second day brought a lull that was somehow worse than the storm.
The wind died down enough to hear other sounds.
Sounds like buildings collapsing under snow load. Like stressed metal tearing.
Like the colony 15 kilometers away fighting for survival and losing.
Duncan tried the communications again.
This time, he got a response.
Faint. Broken. But definitely someone transmitting from the main colony. This is Duncan Krauss. If anyone can hear this, respond.
What is your status?
Static. Then a voice, Duncan? This is Virax. We need help. Buildings are collapsing. Power is failing. We have casualties. How many survivors? Unknown. Maybe 40. Scattered across 3 buildings still standing. Duncan, it is bad. Really bad.
We were not prepared for this.
I know. Listen to me carefully. You need to consolidate everyone into the most reinforced building you have. Combine heat sources. Ration power. And wait.
I cannot get to you until this storm breaks, but when it does, I am coming.
Do you understand? We understand. How long? Best case, another 2 days. Can you hold out that long? A pause. Then, we will try. Do not try. Do. Keep people together. Keep them warm. Keep them alive. I will get there as soon as I can. The transmission cut out. Duncan tried to re-establish contact but got only static.
You are planning to go out there, Thexel said. When the storm clears.
You are planning a rescue. Of course I am. What else would I do? You warned them. They ignored you. They mocked your preparations. You owe them nothing. Duncan looked at the karate engineer with an expression that mixed pity and determination. I do not help people because they deserve it. I help people because they need it. That is what humans do.
We prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and when the worst happens, we help anyone we can.
That is not optional. That is who we are. Even when they were wrong? Especially when they were wrong. Because being wrong should not be a death sentence.
The storm raged for another 60 hours. 3 days of howling wind, blinding snow, and temperatures that turned metal brittle and flesh to ice in minutes. Duncan kept his refugees alive through careful resource management and constant system monitoring. On the morning of the 4th day, the wind finally died. The snow stopped. And the sun rose on a landscape that looked like an alien world even to the aliens who lived there.
Everything was buried. The colony was unrecognizable under 3 meters of snow.
Trees had snapped like twigs.
The research outposts were gone, completely vanished under drifts. And it was cold.
So cold that breathing hurt.
So cold that exposed skin would freeze in seconds. -93°C according to Duncan's instruments.
I am going to the colony, he announced. I need volunteers to help with rescue operations.
Duncan, you cannot survive out there, Thexel protested. None of us can.
I have survival gear rated for these temperatures.
So do you standard karate cold weather equipment is good to -80? We push it a bit, move fast, and we can do this. And if we cannot? Then people die who do not have to. I am going.
You can come or you can stay, but I am not abandoning them.
All 7 karate volunteered.
They geared up with everything Duncan had: cold weather suits, emergency heaters, the works.
It took 30 minutes to get everyone ready and another hour to dig out from the cabin. The journey to the main colony was 15 kilometers that felt like 100.
The snow was deep enough that they had to tunnel through some drifts. The cold was so intense that it penetrated even their insulated suits.
And the landscape was so changed that Duncan had to navigate by GPS because all landmarks were gone.
When they finally reached the colony, they found a disaster.
7 of the 10 main buildings had collapsed under the snow load.
The 3 still standing were barely functional, windows shattered, heating systems failing, survivors huddled in whatever shelter they could find.
Start search and rescue, Duncan ordered. Focus on the standing buildings first.
Anyone alive in the collapsed ones is probably beyond help, but we check anyway.
Move fast.
We have maybe 2 hours before the cold overwhelms our gear.
They found 43 survivors out of the colony's 200 residents.
The rest were dead, frozen, crushed, or simply vanished into the storm. Administrator Kresh was among the dead, found in his office in a building that had collapsed when he refused to evacuate to more reinforced shelter. He was so confident, Virex said, looking at the body. So certain our infrastructure would hold. Confidence without preparation is just arrogance waiting for reality to prove it wrong, Duncan said quietly.
And reality does not care about confidence.
It cares about physics.
The rescue operation took 6 hours.
They consolidated all survivors into Duncan's cabin, 43 refugees plus the original 8.
It was crowded. It was uncomfortable. But everyone was alive. And that was what mattered.
Over the next week, as the temperature gradually rose and conditions became survivable, the survivors worked to rebuild.
Duncan's cabin became the operational center.
His preparations, the ones everyone had mocked, became the baseline for new construction standards.
3 months after the storm, a Galactic Council inspection team arrived to investigate the disaster.
They were shocked by the casualty rate and wanted to understand what had gone wrong.
Duncan gave them a simple explanation: the colonists did not respect the environment. They assumed their technology and confidence would be enough. They were wrong.
The ones who survived were the ones who took the threat seriously and prepared properly.
And you prepared, the lead inspector said. Why? Because I am human.
We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We learned that nature does not care about your confidence or your technology. It only cares about whether you are ready.
So we are always ready. We over-prepare. We build redundancies. We assume the worst and hope for the best. That seems like a stressful way to live. It is a living way to live. Which is better than the alternative. The inspector reviewed Duncan's cabin specifications, his preparation protocols, his resource management during the crisis. Then she looked at the casualty reports from the main colony and the survival rate of Duncan's refugees. You saved 51 lives through preparation that most beings would consider paranoid excess. I saved 51 lives through preparation that any human would consider minimum acceptable planning. There is a lesson here. One that the Galactic Council needs to learn. The lesson is simple: respect nature. Prepare for the worst. And never assume you are too advanced to be killed by weather. Because weather does not care how advanced you are. It only cares about physics. 5 years after the storm, Colony 7 had been completely rebuilt. The new structures followed Duncan's designs: triple insulated, multiply redundant, built to survive conditions that everyone had once dismissed as impossible. The memorial for the 157 colonists who died in the blizzard was inscribed with a simple message: they assumed nature would be gentle. It was not. We remember their sacrifice and learn from their mistake. Duncan stood at the memorial with Thexel on the anniversary of the storm. The karate engineer had become his closest friend and strongest advocate. Do you ever regret it? Thexel asked. Spending so much time preparing for a disaster that might not have come? The disaster did come. So that question is moot. But if it had not? If you had been wrong? Would you regret the effort? Duncan thought about it. No. Because preparation is not wasted just because disaster does not strike. It is practice. It is discipline. It is the habit that keeps you alive when disaster does strike. I would rather be prepared for nothing than unprepared for something. That is very human. That is very sensible. But yes, I suppose it is human. We learned a long time ago that hope is not a plan. That luck is not reliable. That survival requires work. So we work. We prepare. We build systems and redundancies and contingencies. And when disaster strikes, we are ready. And you help others. Even when they mocked you. Especially when they mocked me. Because being wrong is not a crime. It is just ignorance. And ignorance can be fixed with education. You cannot educate the dead. So I kept them alive. Now they know better. Now they teach others. That is worth more than being right. You are a strange species. We are a surviving species. There is a difference. Thexel's bioluminescence showed warm orange, the karate expression of deep affection. I am glad you prepared, Duncan Krauss. I am glad you ignored the mockery and did what you knew was right. You saved my life. You saved all of us. I did what anyone should do. I saw a threat. I prepared. I shared the shelter. That is not exceptional. That is baseline human behavior. Then perhaps all species should learn to be a little more human. The galaxy would be safer. Duncan smiled. The galaxy would be more paranoid. But yes, probably safer. Because the universe does not care about confidence. It does not care about advanced technology. It does not care about your assumptions. It only cares about whether you are prepared when nature reminds you who is actually in charge. And humans are always prepared. Humans try to be prepared. We do not always succeed. But we try. Because that is what survival requires. Not perfection. Just effort. Just the willingness to take threats seriously and do the work necessary to face them. That is all preparation is. That is all I did. I took a threat seriously. I did the work. And when the threat became reality, the work paid off. 51 lives. 51 lives that would have been lost if I had listened to the people who said I was overreacting. 51 lives that were saved because I trusted my own judgment over popular opinion. That is the real lesson of the blizzard. Not that humans are paranoid, but that sometimes being paranoid is the same as being prepared. And prepared beats confident every single time.
They stood in silence for a while, looking at the memorial.
Then Thexel spoke again. The new weather satellite network is operational. Colony administration wants you to help design the emergency protocols. Good. Maybe next time we can avoid the casualties entirely. You think there will be a next time? I think nature is relentless.
I think weather does not care about our colonies or our plans. I think another storm will come eventually, maybe not this decade, maybe not this century, but eventually.
And when it does, we will be ready. Because that is what we do now.
We prepare. We respect the power of nature. We build systems that can survive the worst. And we never, ever assume we are too advanced to be killed by weather. That is wisdom born from tragedy. That is wisdom that should have been obvious without tragedy.
But yes, sometimes people need to learn the hard way.
I just wish the lesson had not cost so many lives.
Would they have listened if you had told them? Some would have. Some did.
The ones who came to my cabin survived. The ones who dismissed me died. That is a harsh teacher, but an effective one. And now everyone listens. Now everyone listens.
Now everyone prepares. Now everyone understands that human paranoia is not a character flaw but a survival trait. That is progress. Expensive progress. But progress nonetheless.
10 years after the blizzard, Colony 7 was thriving. The population had recovered.
The infrastructure was the strongest in the sector.
And every building was built to standards that would have seemed insane before the storm but now seemed merely prudent. Duncan Krauss had become something of a legend.
The human who knew.
The one who prepared. The one who saved 51 lives because he refused to assume nature would be gentle. And every winter, when the storms came, normal storms now, nothing like the mega blizzard, the colonists would look at their reinforced shelters and their emergency supplies and their redundant systems, and they would remember the lesson that cost 157 lives to learn.
Nature does not care about your confidence. It does not care about your technology. It does not care about your assumptions.
It only cares about physics. And physics says that preparation beats confidence.
That redundancy beats simplicity. That respect beats arrogance.
The humans had known this for 300,000 years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill them daily.
Now the rest of the galaxy was learning it too. One disaster at a time. One storm at a time.
One human who refused to assume nature would be gentle at a time.
Duncan never regretted the preparations. Never regretted the effort. Never regretted looking paranoid to beings who did not understand why paranoia was sometimes just another word for wisdom.
Because when the storm came, and the storm always comes eventually, preparation was the only thing that mattered.
Everything else was just hope. And hope, however necessary, was not enough. You needed preparation. You needed redundancy. You needed respect for forces you could not control. You needed to be human about it. Paranoid. Over-prepared.
Ready for everything. Because that was the only way to survive when nature reminded you that confidence without preparation was just arrogance waiting to freeze to death.
The aliens learned. They mocked.
Then the blizzard came. And the human who had reinforced his cabin, who had prepared while they laughed, who had built systems they dismissed as excessive paranoia, that humans saved their lives.
And they never mocked preparation again.
If you enjoyed the story, like the video and subscribe for more. Thank you.